Rectangle. This one is a bit of a crazy one, but it's a little bit simpler than you might think. The instructions may be a little confusing, confused me at first, but let's get right into it. So as always, attempt this yourself. This is just to help you out. We want to add the following method to our rectangle class from previous example. We've gone over this class in 8.18 class rectangle that can be found in the playlist below the like button, whole video on this entire class. So we are allowed to use anything that we've coded so far to help us out with this, and we will have to. We want to return a new rectangle. So we have 3 rectangles we're dealing with, right? The one that this class or this method is currently in. So the class this method is currently in, our parameter right here, and also a new rectangle that we're returning. So this new rectangle represents the area occupied by the tightest bounding box containing both the rectangle passed in and the current rectangle of our class. Our method should not modify the current rectangle or the one that's passed in as a parameter. So we need to create and maintain our own rectangle when we return it. We don't need to worry about declaring any like class fields or anything. We just need to look at this method. So with that in mind, let's start. We have ints, and what we're returning here is points, right? We want a rectangle is made up of 4 points. So this is great. We have 4 points. And we know that from our class, we're dealing with x, y, width, and height. So let's return those things. In x, we'll have an int y, we will have an int width, and then we will have an int height. So you might be wondering, if you are wondering, we've gone over this before, but how we're able to use the same variable names. It's because we can call these specific ones with the this dot, and these are just local variables. So fields and local variables are 2 very different things, and you should definitely know that by now. If you don't, that's no worries. You can always ask or look at previous videos. So int x, what are we doing here? Well, I'll put this on a OneNote. What we're doing is, let's say we have 2 squares like this. And what we want to do is we want to have another square or rectangle, sorry, that encompasses both of these. Sorry about that. It encompasses both of these. And it wants to be as tight as possible. So essentially what we want to do is we want to get the point right at this part, and this part. So let's do that. What we're going to start with is getting the xy values here, right? And then we get the xy values here, which is the height and the width. So xy are these coordinates, height and width are these coordinates. That's what you have to keep in mind when we're solving for this. So we want the minimum values here, right? If we look right here, we are going to get the minimum xy values. So it could be either this one, or it can be this bottom one. We have to decipher that. And so the way we decipher which one's the minimum is by saying it's equal to a math.min. And inside of this math.min, we want to get our current x value. So that's going to be this dot x. And then we also want to get the value of the rectangle passed in. So we do rect dot get x. And that'll get us the x value. Because remember, we can't directly access private fields unless they're in our current class. So rect.getx and this.x, we're going to compare these two, and we're going to get the smallest of the 2. That's going to be our x value. And then we're going to do the same exact thing, but for our y value, because, you know, 2 points, x and y, is what make up, well, 1 x and y make up a single point. So we have this dot y, and then we're going to get the y. So that's going to give us this point right here. Now we need to get this point. And if you recall in the previous videos, whenever we did any work like this, our height and the width, it's our x and y value plus whatever's our height and our width. So if it's plus, like let's say this is 0, 0, and this is like 10, 1, the point, well, it's 0 plus 10, and then 0 plus 1. So since we're adding that here, what we want to do is we want to get, we want to add it here as well. So let's do math dot, and since we're getting the farthest side this time, instead of doing minimum, we don't want the minimum, we want the maximum, because we don't want the minimum right here, right? We don't want this, we want this up here. So we are going to have math.max. Same thing, just kind of different, just the opposite. So math.max, and remember, like I said, whenever we had a height and width and our x and y, to get the actual point right here, we had to add to our x value the width, add to our y value the height. So for this, remember this is dealing with the width, so that's like along the x-axis. We are going to do this dot x plus our this dot width. So that's how we would get this width or this width, whichever one's greater. We want the longest one because remember it has to encompass both of these rectangles. So we have the widths together, and then we have to also look at the other one, which is for our rect. So we'll do rect dot, and then we should have here a get x, and then we'll add to this a rect dot get, and then this will be should be get width. So that's going to be for our width, and then we're going to do the same thing but for our height, and we'll just replace this dot x with this dot y, and of course width needs to be replaced with height, and then x needs to be replaced with y, and then this needs to be replaced with height. And that should be good. From here, we just want to return a rectangle. So return new, we have to create a new rectangle, and inside of this rectangle, we are going to pass our x, we're going to pass our y, and our width and our height. Remember, these values we got, it's the longest point, right? But this is with it added. So when we pass it back into our class here, we want just the value, not from if we were looking at an x-axis, because remember what we're doing is we're adding this point to get to this point. We want kind of more like you can think of as the raw point. And to do that, what we'll have to do is take our width and minus our x. And the same thing with our height. We'll take height minus our y. So if you have any questions about that, again, you can leave them in the description. But just a quick overview of what this function is doing is with our x and our y, we're getting the coordinate at this base right here, the lowest coordinate. And we want to stretch the rectangle as much as possible. So we want to get the max coordinate over here, which is why we do math.max, and we have to get the width and height. And to get the width and height, we have to add our x with the width and then the y with the height. But when we pass it in as a constructor, we don't want it in that format. So we do width minus x and then height minus y. So let's press submit. It seems like I have spelled rectangle wrong, as always. So rectangle, submit this again. And again, of course, if you have any questions, if you want any more practice, description or comments. And that is me passing the exercise 8.21, which is unionRectangle. Hope to help.